February is kind of a nice time because you can kind of catch your breath a little bit. We got a dead period right now for recruiting. I think our staff did a really good job of, continuing to be aggressive. We're not going to have as many new players as last year, but we still were, aggressive, trying to add, good players that can help us both through the transfer portal and through high school. Exciting time for our league, adding North Dakota State. They're a great program. I got a chance during my years at South Dakota State to play 8 games against those guys, and we were 4-4 in those that I was a part of. So we had some great battles. Fargo Dome, I think, will be one of the toughest places to play, if not the toughest place to play coming into the league. But I've won there twice. It makes it even more fun when you win there, when you play at those tough places and you beat them on the road that way. So excited to have them out. I think Coach Polisek's a heck of a coach. We had some good battles back when we were assistants in 2016 there. I think that's a great add for the conference. Excited about the new staff, how it's coming along. We got Eric Link, Zach Lujan, and Darius Smith here already doing a great job. Ryan McNamee is doing a great job with our chief of staff. And then we have one more that will probably hopefully be released either later this week or maybe next Monday at the latest, that we're excited on the direction we're going there. So yeah, a lot of stuff going on, exciting times.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of the 4-4 record against South Dakota State, my bad. Against North Dakota State when you were at South Dakota State. Is there a little bit of like, I thought I was done with these kind of guys feeling, or what is that kind of feeling for you?
I thought I was done playing in that dome because that is a tough place to play. But no, I think it's a great ad for the conference. I mean, I think obviously those things take time to work out, and it was probably just an easier transition to have UTEP and Northern Illinois move. But you look at like their computer ranking is really high. I mean, I think they ended up, their computer ranking, like in the Sagarin ratings, ended up higher than like anybody in the group of 5-6 this year. So that's something that will definitely help. Help the strength of schedule, for teams in our conference, adding them, and I think it's an exciting move. I think really good for football. Obviously, only affects football. It's not in the other sports, but I think it's a great move for our conference.
You know the FCS really well. You were a part of the Dakota Market rivalry. You were in the conference with them. When you were at South Dakota State, I mean, did you always kind of look at North Dakota State as an inevitability to go up to the FBS, or how did you kind of view it when you were in that league?
I don't know. I mean, they were the gold standard of FCS for sure. When I 2015, I got to Montana State, and at that time they had, I think, won a few in a row, and they definitely were the gold standard. I think as you've seen other teams move up, James Madison was a power. We played them in the playoffs in 2017, and look how quickly they've transitioned to being a playoff team. I think more in the last few years, it's kind of become more of, hey, what else do we have to prove for them at the FCS level? And I'm happy it worked out, being our league and not, the Conference USA or the MAC or, some other league for them, because I do think it can strengthen our league and make it a little stronger, losing some of those teams we're losing to the Pac-12. So, I think it's a great move. I mean, it's a pretty big city. It's not as big as like an Albuquerque or anything, but it's a media market. They have great coverage, a great fan base and following, and they travel well. Now they'll have to travel by plane more than they travel by car, driving down to South Dakota State or things. So I think it's a no-brainer, great move for the conference, and I think it probably helps. It got really expensive to move up. They probably missed that. They missed the bargain. They missed the sale to move up that they had a few years ago. Now it's very expensive to move up, but they're well funded and be a great addition.
Do you believe they can immediately contend for Mountain West titles in football?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be eligible for the championship game right away, but no, I think they'll be a top half team coming in right away. I think they're very good.
And with the caveat that on-field success doesn't always match, financial health of the athletic department and all that, would you like to see the Mountain West kind of pull from the upper tier of the FCS in future kind of realignment cycles?
Yeah, I mean, I thought there's really 4 FCS teams who I think just their following are FBS based. Last year, and I would have said that's South Dakota State, North Dakota State, Montana State. I mean, those are FBS programs and FCS disguises. They have great ticket sale. But I think Montana, we got to get our ticket sales going, and we're going to set a record this year. But I think Montana sells 20,000 season tickets here for football. It's amazing. So those 3 I think are not like the rest of FCS when you see Western Illinois playing Tennessee Tech in front of 3,000 people and stuff. So no offense to Western Illinois, former place I worked in Tennessee Tech, but Yeah, I mean, I think those are great targets. You know, I don't know how big our league wants to get, and you know, the one thing that's unique with North Dakota State and South Dakota State being in that Summit League, for other sports, it was pretty seamless to add football only. You know, that's a little bit more of an obstacle, I think, for big sky schools, because you know, most of those big sky schools are all sports except Cal Poly and Davis. And you know, Davis is joining the league for other sports. So.
On North Dakota State, what can you share about the process? Was there discussion at your level? Obviously, there was at presidents and the AD level. Was there any discussion at the coaching level?
No, I mean, we kind of heard some of the people in our institution asking for our feedback and things, but it was not. We didn't have like a coach's Zoom call to entertain that. That was above our pay grade as coaches. But I think there was a buzz in the industry about it happening, and I had people from South Dakota State calling me, hey, is there some legs to this, and that type of thing. So but we weren't really looped into that discussion. But I do think it's a positive for the league. I don't think there's any way you can say it's a negative for the league.
Going to throw it off even round robin, so now there'll be 9 teams to play. Any discussion on how they're going to schedule? You were already given your home and away opponents. Obviously, that's going to go back in the hopper. What can you share, if anything, about what they're going to do now with the schedule for this coming year?
Yeah, they're going to rework it. I think they don't think the timeline is going to be changed that much. I think they told us it'd be late February, early March is when we'd know our dates and things. And now it might just be the dates and exactly who we're playing. I think I was expressed too that it's not going to totally change things. Like maybe one game will change. Someone will shuffle out, and you'll add North Dakota State, and they won't play one team. So we'll see how that all falls. But it's. I remember they used to always say that football games got scheduled 10 years in advance. Now I think times have changed a little bit, right? So.
Something about FCS transferring, transitioning up to FBS. How do you see this for this program? Since they've had so much success on the FCS level, do you think it'll be like a really smooth transition?
Yeah, I think it'll be a really smooth transition. I mean, their record probably over the last 15 years against FBS teams, I'm sure they have a winning record. I don't know exactly what it is. I think it might be like 9-5 or something. So I think they'll transition very well. Look at James Madison, how they've transitioned. And again, those were 2 teams that were really at the pinnacle of FCS football, like when I was at South Dakota State. So I had back-to-back years lost in the semifinals in 2017 and 2018 at NDSU and at James Madison. So they're very good. I don't think this will be a tough transition for them at all.
I didn't think so. I just wanted your opinion on it. And as far as your recruiting class, freshmen and transfers, did you get what you wanted on your wish list, and how would you rate it?
Yeah, I think we did really well. I mean, it's tough to totally grade because you really find out once they're here. Again, we got Dorian Thomas, who played 1 snap at Arizona in 2 years. That wasn't one that was really celebrated, but he ended up being first team all conference. And, we had 4 guys who were FCS transfers last year who ended up first team or second team all conference. So tough to judge it, but just looking at the transfers, DB, I think we learned this year you got to have great depth at DB. I thought there were times where we were a little thin on our depth at DB as we had injuries and things. So getting Armani Arnold from Cincinnati was great. He was a guy who I had coached previously at Idaho and then transferred to Cincinnati. I think he's a great add. There's another guy we're getting, Josh Barnes, as a walk-on, but he was a player we recruited on scholarship to Idaho and was looking for a new start. KJ Battle was a good walk-on DB we added. His brother Ty's on the team, came from Towson. Towson's coach spoke highly of him. Jalen Charles is a guy we think could step in and compete to start at defensive end. And we lost a lot of sacks with Keyshawn James Newby and Brett Carr, who Devin Dyer was a big add to get a in-state transfer, get a La Cueva kid from one of the top programs in the state to come up here for his last year. That was an exciting add. We had to reload our specialist room. So getting Lincoln Epstein, he had got a chance to snap in 3 games because of injuries and things. So getting a guy who had game experience was big because I didn't want to get somebody who never played in the game. Marcus Fetchko from Laney Junior College was a guy who we had recruited even back at Idaho. He was in our camps at Idaho. He's from Spokane, Washington. I think he's a guy who can come in and hopefully compete for a starting tackle spot. Will Hicks, who's went to high school in Houston, played at Hampton, one of my former schools I got to coach at, but he has played a lot of snaps. I believe started every game last year. We think he can really be an answer to fill in that spot. Caleb Coleman and Kaiwan McCray played last year, that star position on our defense, and has played a lot of snaps, has good length. Michael Kern is a guy we think can come in and compete with Charles for the punting job. We actually were able to get him. He's a non-scholarship player right now. He's just looking for a chance to compete, but he's been an FBS starter before, so that'll be a good competition. Kevin Longstreet, and he can add some depth to our D-back room. We're going to play him a little bit more at safety, but he's flexible, can move around. Clay Martineau is a really talented guy. Athletic, we recruited him out of high school too, from Oregon at Idaho. He had family members. His father played basketball at Idaho, so had some connections. But he's long and athletic. Played a lot on special teams last year. I think he can give us some depth, and I think we're going to take a look if he can rush the passer a little bit too. He had some nice blitzes, and another way that maybe he'd be a first and second down linebacker, would be a third down DN pass rusher. Cam Matthews is a young physical back who was a 1,000-yard rusher in high school and like a 10-yard a carry guy. I think he's rocked up. He's done a good job of workouts already. Eric McLean's a Chicago kid from Ball State who played in a lot of games, has a lot of experience, good-looking athlete. Just watching him run around outside. Ken Meir will add some depth in the O-line. Cole Millward is a guy who I'm really excited about. Started a lot of games at Weber State. Look, a lot of our guys who transferred from Weber State or from the Big Sky Conference and were good players there, made a real easy transition. So he's a guy who can compete to start at tackle. We hope to move. Malik, who started at tackle a lot for us last year inside, and then Malik focused more at guard. We were getting Luke Moga, was a good addition. We were hoping to add a athletic quarterback. James Lopestein is still trying to pursue an extra year of eligibility, but that's all in the courts. We really have no control or no timeline on that. So, adding an athletic quarterback who's talented to compete with Jack, like we had that good competition last year between those two quarterbacks, I think certainly adds another layer. We're excited to get him. Joey Olson, good-looking tight end. He's tweaked his knee a little bit, so that might be a little bit of an issue for him, but he's a good-looking rascal who we think can help us a lot at tight end. Connor Olson, another guy to come in and compete for kicking. Troy was a guy I thought was really a good player. Troy O'Meara, who was at UNLV last year. He had some big plays against us. He's got a little knee thing too that could limit him a little bit during spring, but looks like Terrell Owens, great looking big dude. And then some of the JUCO guys we got. AJ Robinson, signed early, but he's a physical kid that we think can help with our depth inside. Trenton Rocker's one of those shots to hopefully be a pass rusher. He's got to put on some weight, but I really don't think he has to put on a ton of weight to be a third down pass rusher, just for an every down guy. Nick Romero is a guy we're excited about. He was 13 of 14 on field goals. I kind of liked it this year when we only missed one field goal all year. That's kind of reassuring. So I was looking for someone who was going to miss one or less field goals. And I double checked that the goalposts are just as big at FCS as FBS, so I thought that was a good bet. So a pretty good year to go 13 of 14 as a freshman. So excited about him. Kiefer Sibley, I thought was a good back on a great offense. One of the backups in North Texas. Bear Tenney was a great pickup that I think really can help us. He's a big guy, looks good moving around. I think he can really help us at tight end. And Albert, junior college guy, can help us with rushing the passer from College of San Mateo, which is a great high school program. Trip Walsh can help us with our depth there. A lot of guys we got to talk about. Miles Williams, was a really productive guy. Had about 40 catches at Eastern Washington. And you look at Eastern Washington, he's always had good players. Eastern Washington had two receivers playing the Super Bowl last night, Cooper Kupp and I don't know if Evan Chisholm played, but he's on the Patriots. So great offense he's been involved in that can help us there. So good group of good group of transfers, and then a lot of great high school players as well. I don't know if I'm going to talk about everybody.
We had talked about it last year, and you just kind of touched on it there. The idea of 5 or 6 quarterbacks is better than rostering 4 and all that as well. How much of a priority was it though to get a guy like Moga and to get another quarterback of that kind of skill set?
Yeah, we kind of got a unique situation. We had 4 quarterbacks returning 3 of them had combined for 1 4-year college snap. You know, Toa got 1 snap this year. I think it might have been the Colorado State game. We put him in for 1 play. So we didn't have a lot of experience. So I definitely wanted to get a guy who'd, you know, been in some games. And Luke doesn't have extensive experience, but you know, he's, you know, had some game time. You know, I think he played 3 or 4 games in his career there. And I really hope we can get an athletic guy. You know, someone who could help us, because you saw, you know, this year having, you know, James as your backup quarterback, but was also able to, you know, still contribute. Even though he didn't win the starting job, he still was able to have a role and contribute. You know, I kind of feel like that way you have, you know, a couple options. We have a competition, you know, for the job, but if you know, if Jack wins the job, you may still have a out to, you know, to get something out of Luke. So I think he fit exactly what we're looking for, and he's very talented. You know, talked to the coaches who had him at Oregon, and you know, we got to get him 100% healthy. He's a little limited right now in some of the running things, but he's a talented young man. He was very fast out of high school, and I think it'll be a you know, we want to get better. We got to keep having great competition across the board to keep having this program grow.
Yeah, on that note, we know Jack is going to miss some of spring practice, you know, maybe all of it, but maybe not and all that, which kind of mirrors what happened last year.
I'm pretty optimistic he's going to get more than he got last summer. I think he looks good. I mean, he's running around full speed. It's just he's limited his throwing. He threw me about a 5-yard pass today. It looked good. We got to keep stretching that out, but you know, he takes care of his body really well. I think we'll get something out of him this spring, but we want to be smart with it. We definitely don't want to rush it back, and you know, I think we have to evaluate these other guys. You know, we got to evaluate Luke in our system. We got to evaluate Toa to see how he's continued to grow. I think the bowl practices really helped Toa. You know, he really you know, had an opportunity to kind of move ahead of our 3rd-string quarterback last year, Cole, during those bowl practices. So that's, you know, a sign of why winning kind of begets winning. It's, you know, that extra. I don't know exactly how many practices we got, but somewhere probably more than 10 really helped us develop some guys.
With the caveat of, you know, it kind of mirrors what happened last year where Lokesty kind of played his way into a competition with Jack. Is this Jack's job to lose, you know, until said otherwise, or is it?
I would say as the returning starter, it's his job to lose, but you know, there's gonna be a competition. You know, again, he's not etched in stone for the you know, the first game, but I think, you know, he certainly has played a lot of games in this offense. Started, you know, whatever, 13 games for a 9-win team. So, you know, it ain't going to be easy to beat Jack out. But you know, Luke's confident, Luke's talented. So, you know, I think we'll have, you know, we'll see how this competition emerges.
During the early signing period, I remember you mentioned that you wanted to have a presence in Illinois since Northern Illinois was joining the conference. Is that going to be the same with North Dakota State, having that presence over there to kind of recruit?
Yeah, you know, North Dakota's a really small state population-wise, so it's not quite the hotbed of, like, you know, compared to like Chicago. You know, Chicago's being one of the top 5 cities in America. There's just a lot of players there. You know, because population is still a huge factor on you know, recruiting that way. So probably not. You know, probably not. I do think it opens up another game just for Midwest kids. You know, maybe it opens up a Minneapolis kid or something where, you know, now he knows that if he came out here to play, he'd enjoy this beautiful weather. I know I talked to somebody in Minneapolis today, and they said they were just excited it broke freezing today for the first time in a long time. But maybe somebody like that opens it up. But yeah, North Dakota's a pretty small state. We didn't even mess with it much when I was at South Dakota State going up to recruit there, even though it was a few-hour drive away.
And then thoughts on the New Mexican kids signing, Maldonado, French, Alderman?
Yeah, I think we had some great guys. You know, Hayes Baum is already here doing a great job already from Cibola. I think he's going to have a great future for us. I'm very excited to him. You know, Jacob Maldonado, you know, Cleveland, you know, is obviously one of the top, if not the top high school program in the state. Very well run, very structured. I think his background, you know, a lot of his you know, his offensive coordinator is a former coach here, you know, with Coach Ridenour. So I mean, he'll be well prepared to come into you know, a college system and do a great job. French, you know, Hobbs is one of the bigger high schools in the state. He's an athletic guy who's raw. We got to develop. He played more tight end, or he played more, receiver for them. We're going to look at him on defense, and then Alderman. You know, it was impressive. Coach Booth, you know, got to see him play recruiting wise live. You know, I saw him work out at the school in the spring. They played, actually, my son's high school got to play him, so I got to watch a game as a dad, but my eyes are kind of always drawn to a lineman. So I think he's a kid who's got a lot of upside and good size that we can develop. And you know, I think in state we're always going to have to find some developmental guys that we can kind of put the finishing touches on, but that's fine.
And then, yeah, Hayes Baum is already getting the workouts and all that stuff. Cade Mitchell as well. Max Leeper. Thoughts on any of the new Lobos straight from high school?
Yeah, we got a bunch of those guys here already. I mean, Cade looks good. I know Coach Slice was saying we got to clean up a few things with his motion, but he's got a really strong arm. He's like, throwing the ball 75 yards, workouts and stuff. He's got a cannon. Max Leeper looks really good. I asked him how much he weighs every day. He looks very skinny. I probably should tell him he can't take his shirt off until he's 225. I think he's like 214 right now. But very, very skinny and long, but looks really good running around, catching it. Mensa was a guy who had an injury last year, so didn't play a lot as a senior, but I think he has looked good getting back into it. Mingo looks good running around. DJ Darling, looks athletic, running around. I'm trying to think of other guys who are here right now. Nick Barber, I think, is a guy who can factor in as a freshman. He's very physically mature and very strong at D tackle. I would not be surprised if he, pushes to be, on the bus to travel for the first game, or on the, I guess the bus to the hotel for their first game there. Make sure I'm not missing anybody else who's here earlier. So Barber's here. Marco Beltran looks good moving around. He was a guy, just even when I was recruiting in Houston in January, I had a lot of opposing high school coaches mention him as he definitely had the respect of the high school coaches in the area down there at College Park. DJ Darling has looked good moving around. He's a fluid guy, a really good athlete, who's definitely moving and looking well. Xavier Rivera Rogers is here. He looks solid. Some of these guys, it's a tough transition when you come right in the middle of the year. You thought you were going to go to prom, and now you're into these workouts with Coach Heim, and he's getting after you pretty good. But Mensa, Mingo, Cade Mitchell have all looked good, and I think it's a great head start for these guys getting here and getting a few. Gerard Terry, who's a walk-on running back from Sierra Canyon, he had a tough day. He kind of got in late, which was really bad by me. I should have probably held him off to the fall, but he really wanted to get going because he had graduated from high school. So he came in like a week late, and his first workout was a little rough coming in. We're a little bit behind guys, but yeah, it's a good group.
And then Maldonado has that gymnastics background. I mean, you got two linebackers now in the engineering department, including Hayes Baum and Mercury Swaim. I forgot the name of the Illinois commit, but he was like a bowler, a rugby guy. What I'm trying to say is, what are some of the skills that you covet when you're looking at these high schoolers?
Well, I like guys who are competitive, guys who like to compete, and I think you definitely see that in other sports. I like guys who have a diverse athletic background. I think that keeps you healthier, as an athlete than student athletes who specialize at a really young age. I had a really good old lineman who was a starter for me at South Dakota State, who was a tennis player in high school. So he was basketball, tennis, and offensive lineman, and he had very good hand-eye coordination. I think helped with his punching, defensive lineman. I said if you hit that little tennis ball, you can definitely hit a defensive lineman rushing across, and he got very good pass protection. So I like guys who have had a diverse thing. Looking at his gymnastics background, obviously there's so much body control that comes into that. I think that'll probably help, Jacob make those acrobatic catches for us.
Coach, second year recruiting, how's it changed? Obviously had a ton of players last year, number one. And number two, how was the reception down south, Aaron Ocampo, these high school coaches? Because I know that was a big thing with Rocky, the deep roots here in New Mexico.
Yeah, I hope one day we can find it. I think back when Rocky was here, you had your three best offensive skill players from southern New Mexico, and you had Cole from Artesia at quarterback, and obviously Basket from Clovis there at receiver, and Dontrell at running back. So I want to make sure we're not missing those guys. So I thought we had great turnout, great response, from those guys, and they were excited to be there. I had some schools who said that, Rocky Long was the last Lobo head coach who'd been in their school. So obviously that's a good company to try to keep with. But we want to, we represent this whole state of New Mexico. We want to find the best players in this state, and don't want to miss guys who are close to home. And I saw some good prospects out there, so hopefully we can keep building that and getting those kids on campus, and everyone's a Lobos, as I say.
Had a lot of eyes on the program this year, winning the 9 games, going to the bowl game. How much did you guys notice about with trying to convince kids to come here and stuff like that from your success this year?
Yeah, it's all a little different. I think Van in the high school recruiting, I think, we couldn't really go out till January, so we'd already kind of like signed that high school class. I think that'll show up more like in next year's class. But the high school coach reception, because football coaches like football. I'm a college coach, but I like watching the NFL playoffs and the Super Bowl and things like that. And I'm sure those high school coaches like to do the same thing when they're on their couch. And we have a lot of games in our league anyway that end up being late night games that you might watch, even if you were working that day as a high school coach. So I definitely think the respect for what we've done here has been noticed in the coaching community. I think the portal is a zoo to get through. There's so many guys in the portal. I'm happy that we kept going and we didn't. I feel like guys like Hicks from Hampton, we got what we wanted. We wanted some length out of that position. We wanted a guy who, I thought we saw that with Caleb and Kai Wan having that nickel who wasn't 5'10", helped out, got hands and passing windows and things. I think getting, I didn't want to settle and get a quarterback who wasn't athletic. Again, I wanted to get some receivers who had production because we saw, Keegan Johnson, he had never had a year like he had for us where he had 58 catches or whatever, but he had some years where he had 30 catches, and I thought that was a starting point. So getting, Miles and Troy, who both had 30, 40 catch seasons in college, now hopefully we can put them in those positions. We thought we needed to overall upgrade the tight end room, and his athleticism. I think we got that. So, sometimes it can be frustrating because you might have a guy you like early, but then you can't afford him, or you get outbid, and you just got to keep. That was my message to our staff: is just keep looking. There's enough guys in here. We got to keep sorting through and sifting through and finding the right fits. And I think we found those right fits. And again, I think for the most part, those guys were all, really excited to be here, which is what you want. You don't want anybody to have to twist their arm to be here. You want guys who are excited to be there. I kind of view the same way, with our coaching staff. I don't want to beg guys to be here. And again, I think it's having. I don't know the stats on this, but I imagine we had 4 coaches at a group of 5, 6 program get Power 4 jobs. Obviously you have some situations like the North Texas coach goes. He probably brought more than 4, I imagine, from his staff. I don't know the exact numbers, but I think that's probably one of the better numbers in the country for not having a head coaching change with guys doing that, which I think just shows our program's creating value for people within it, whether they're assistant coaches, whether they're players like Keyshawn James Newby, who had a great performance at the East-West Shrine game, and hopefully he's going to play his way into an NFL roster, or whether there's a guy like Dorian Thomas or Trey DeBuck, who was part of our program and now decided they wanted to try to get more money at a Power 4 level program. Daniel Hughes would be in that same boat. We're just trying to create value and make those guys better from having being a part of our program.
So on the way up here, actually, we saw Scott Trey walk in. So just one of the real ones running it back. I like that. Just kind of not really expectations, just optimism of him going into another year, going into the spring and like.
No, I think that was a big one to get back. And again, Scott Trey was our, he was our starter coming out of spring. He was our starter going into the fall. He started the UCLA game and had a great drive on the first touchdown in that game, and then he ends up, spraining his ankle in that game, and then Damon kind of has a coming out party, and I think there's things that Scott Trey has to keep improving on. I think he's got to improve in his passing game. I think that was probably the one area that he really kind of stood out. Damon really stood out above Scott Trey. Damon was really good in the receiving game, could really catch it well out of the backfield. That's an area that we got to keep working on. And Coach Smith, I think sometimes you have a coaching change that can help guys too, because you're still going to remember the things the last running back coach told you, but now you're going to maybe hear some different ways or learn some different ways of doing things from Coach Smith. But I think it was big to get him back, and I was excited. And again, it's those are tough things, last year because we had such high expectations. But credit to him, I think Scott Trey was never one who pouted. You never saw bad body language, even though he, I'm sure he would have preferred to get more touches than he had. And he's looking at his old team goes to wins the national title. But I was very impressed by his attitude throughout, and that's really why I wanted to get him back. I really made a push to try to retain him because I knew he was a great teammate who I think has, put everything into having a breakout senior year, just what Damon did. So I think, Scottrade was a first team all conference preseason guy, and we got to keep him healthy and keep improving and try to put that all together with that. And, I think, Deshaun Buchanan was another guy who was big to get back, even though those guys ended up probably being more third and fourth back last year. I thought we had 4 really good backs last year. So, and then we'll add those new guys in and see where it goes. But, I feel good about our running back room, where we're at.
Coach, I would say over the last decade and a half at least, since I've been around, it's been very difficult for Lobos to find a difference maker on the outside at receiver. And certainly Keaton Johnson was that when he was on the field. You saw what difference he made for your offense. I wanted to ask you about him, Ray, and kind of what you think it might look like with him playing that role, and how difficult it is to get a player like that here, and just how important they are for the offense.
Yeah, I really try to do our homework on all these transfers. So I talked to Coach Mullen about Troy. And I talked. I even like going back. Further, I talked to Coach Dillingham at Arizona State. And Dillingham said, "No, we didn't want to lose him, man. I mean, he would have been our third receiver. Would have started in 11 personnel. And we had 3 receivers in the field, and good kid." So we were trying to do our homework on that, making sure we found the right fit. And, I think he's hoping to be that number 1 guy. I think even the way it was last year, I think he was number 2 in receiving yards and catches there behind the Jalen Bradley kid, who's a really good player. So I think that's his hopes. But, it'll be a competition. And, again, he's going to miss some of spring coming off of a knee, so it'll be an opportunity for Miles Williams, kind of stake his claim. And then, we got to do a good job of getting guys like that we had in the program. We got to keep improving those guys. We got to keep getting Sean Miller better. We got to keep getting Ziel better, which those guys think can make jumps. We got to get KD back, coming off his medical red shirt, and improve him. So I think that'll be a competitive room, and I think overall that's a position that we need more production, more depth out of as a whole this year to get where we want to be.
With the caveat that it's hard to replace a guy who's making moves at the Shrine Bowl and all that as well, and then Carr, who was really good. Of course, you touched on it. He lost a lot of production coming off the edge and all that. What is kind of the vision for the guys coming back and the guys coming in who you're kind of expecting to, help replace some of that production?
Yeah, I think Darren Nagu played very well last year. And Darren Nagu was one of those guys who, he wasn't the man. He had people reaching out to him from Power 4 schools and trying to coax him into the portal throughout. So I really appreciate him staying loyal to being here. But I think he's a starter level guy. And again, he had a tough deal last year where he missed all summer and missed fall camp, missed the first 2 games because of his visa issue. I think if he had been here that whole time through the summer and the fall, I mean, he probably would have played even more. He might not have, given that opportunity to, Carhu to get a starting job, that type of thing. So I think he's a big one. I think other guys in the program, Elijah Brody had an off-season shoulder surgery, and you watch some of the clips of him early in the year. He's doing a really good job, and then the shoulder just kind of became unmanageable. He's trying to be tough and play through it, but I think it really affected him. So, he's a guy who, you watch the clips of last year, had some pressure coming off the edge. Cody Thumler is a freshman who really traveled with us all year, and I think can help and be in the mix there and do that. And then, we took some shots on goal with new guys. That was really an area we went hard to. You had Jalen Charles at end. You had Albert Tukalo. You had Rocker at defensive end. I think there's one more defensive end that I'm maybe even missing in there that we added. Maybe it was just 3. And then Clay Martineau is a guy who's kind of a flex. Again, we're going to try him at, linebacker, but I think can also be hopefully like a 3rd-round pass rush guy. And we got to do a really good job with how we coach that up, so he's getting enough time to work. Obviously the skill set is different from being an edge rusher and being a linebacker, so we got to do a good job with him. But his length and athleticism, adds a little something, to that room. So I'd say that's one of the things that we got to really. I'm excited to see who kind of emerges, and I do not mind that being. This year it ended up being that our guys we felt played the most on base downs, also played the most on 3rd down on the edge. We kind of subbed in sometimes, Guett D tackle or slid. Xavier Slayton's another guy who kind of played some edge, but then and slid down and nickel and rush from a 3 technique. You know, I'm not opposed to, you know, having 2 guys be your first and second down ends, and then two fresh guys who are coming off the bench just be nickel pass rushers, and that's their role. So that's something we got to have. You know, we have a lot of candidates, but we got to see who really rises to the top of the cream in that competition. I think that'll be something to really watch, interesting to follow during spring practice.
And it was the first time we talked to you since you brought on, you know, you touched on to Lujan, Link, and Smith and all that. And, you know, Lujan's a guy who had a heck of a rise over the last couple of years,
Yeah.
heading Northwestern. Link and Smith, you know, Link's a guy that was a, you know, P4 special teams coordinator, and Smith was a guy who was another FCS head coach. I mean, what made those guys kind of the right guys for these positions?
Yeah, you know, I think we had, I think just seeing the success we had, I think the pool of candidates who were coming, and we put together, we had great coaches who came last year. You know, we got a lot of guys who came from good programs like Memphis, and you look what, you know, Memphis' coach gets a Power 4 job this year. We were able to get guys to come from them, but I think this year it was probably even more of a, you know, people who were interested in these jobs and trying to get these jobs and coming after that. And I think the success we had and you know, seeing the guys leave for the Power 4 made them even more attractive. So they each bring a little something different. You know, we're still shuffling, you know, things around on offense, you know, with losing Coach Elliott, but you know, Coach Lujan is just a smart skill coach. You know, again, I really think he could coach probably any position on offense except the offensive line. You know, he has coached quarterbacks and running backs when I was with him at South Dakota State. You know, we had looked at him coaching receivers, but I think he could coach tight ends as well. And he's very, very smart. Just him and Luke are probably like the 2 most intelligent coaches I've ever worked with. And you know, they say you surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. You don't want to be the smartest person in the room. So I think that really was successful there. And just having him being available and, you know, however you want to look at it, whether it was a tough deal for him or it puts like a little silver lining on it, he gets pushed out for Chip Kelly, you know, to come in and be the OC there at there. But he's a brilliant young mind that I think will be even better for having, you know, coaching has a way of humbling you sometimes, and you know, you go through getting your butt fired. I've been through that, you know, 4 times where I was out of work and I had to go find a job. I think that made me better. So I think he was a great add to the staff. Coach Link, you know, I think I have to make really strong hires with special teams just because that's not my background. You know, again, when you're coaching the O-line as an assistant all those years, you're not involved much enough in special teams except maybe the PAT field goal team. So, you know, a guy who's run it, you know, in the SEC, won it, you know, used to be the top conference of football. Now you'd probably say the Big Ten because they've won 3 straight. But you know, he spent 6 years there running the show there. He's an expert on it. You know, some people like Rob Ash, who I really respect and worked for at Montana State, really vouched for him from the head coaching things. I talked to Coach Drinkowitz for him. Coach Drinkowitz thought highly of him. You know, just, you know, he was kind of a guy who he was going to reassign and move around. Just, you know, that's obviously one of the most competitive leagues in America. So, you know, if you have some stuff that's working, people are studying it with huge staffs to try to find answers to it. So, you know, he's, you know, both these guys are great families. We're adding to the staff as well. So I think he's really going to be a guy who, you know, similar to Coach DePrato, can just kind of run special teams. And, you know, I'll check on him, see how he's doing, see what he needs to support it. But a guy who, you know, is going to be able to kind of take the ball and run with it. And then, you know, Darius has got a great energy, great teacher. Always love having a guy who's got head coaching experience in the staff to run things by. He was there at a tough time during COVID, and then COVID I think was even tougher in Division II than it was in Division I. They didn't play that whole year, so he was there 2 years as a head coach, but only got to coach 1 season. But you know, just his track record too. He had, in the last 2 years, he had a 1,900-yard rusher and an 18-yard rusher at Southern Utah, which is not, you know, a half of FCS football. You know, a team that doesn't have as many resources. That shows me. One, good eye and talent recruiting, which I think is very important for your running back coach, and then also great player development, because those guys probably weren't finished products when they got there. And I really liked his energy. So those were 3 good ads. And then, you know, again, we'll comment the other one. There's another guy kind of we're targeting for our last spot that's open that I've worked with in the past. I think would be a tremendous addition as well. So I think we're. I tell the players, when we lose somebody, and we lost some good coaches, but we're gonna get somebody just as good or better when we have movement.
So Patterson, a 6'3" receiver with a bunch of height. Day as well. I mean, he's worked with you in Idaho, and then he was part of the real ones. Can you just speak to both of them and your expectations for them?
You know, Patterson is a huge target. from a great program, Crete-Moni, which is one of the better programs in that Chicago kind of south suburb area. Xavier Slayton is actually from that same high school, so had good success of getting a player out of that high school and have them do well. But a big target, we had taken some smaller receivers earlier in this signing class. Balin, George, Darling, and Mingo are all, sub 6 foot, great, run well, great change of direction, but we wanted to get a big guy there. And then the other one you asked was Day Buchanan, or
Yes, yeah, Day.
Yeah, I think Day did a tremendous job for us on special teams. And he was one of our only guys who started on, the main 4 special teams: punt, punt return, kickoff return throughout the year. I thought he was very physical in protection. I know he's a guy who, I think the defensive coaches even respect. Coach Nowinski even mentioned to me, he goes, you're not going to play that guy more. We'll take him at safety. And I said, no, we're going to play him more. He's going to have an expanded role, and I think he, I can see him having a big jump, this offseason. I love the way he competes, how hard he plays, he runs well. I think he'd have a big step up here for us.
And the Real Ones campaign, again, I think it started off with Jamar, Caden, and then Jackson, of course, the reigning Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year, your quarterback. Was there anything to that, or was that just kind of like social media? I mean, as far as like locking up the trenches first, and then a couple of your star players on both sides of the field?
No, and really, we were kind of attacking it all. I think just how we released those guys on social media, there's nothing to look at there. And I wanted to make sure that everybody who we brought back, who was on a, like a revenue share agreement, that we honored and we brought back. I know that some of the timing was helping to create momentum right when the season ended, but even down the stretch, I was like, talking to our people and saying, hey, let's make sure, I want to get everybody out there. It's a statement of who's coming back, and I want to honor those guys for their loyalty and get them out there. So, the order of release was not, shown by the importance of them re-signing or anything like that, or how we attacked them. Again, most of these deals were all, they were all signed before the transfer portal opened, which was January 2nd. That's credit to our guys. We didn't have any ones of guys trying to go in the transfer portal and shop, see if they could find something better and then come back. And all these guys were locked up before the portal even opened, which helped us know, what our needs were and go attack that way. So, I think it was a good, good marketing campaign. Again, I kind of said that even when we played Utah State. Albuquerque's not for everybody, but I think when you enjoy it like I do, it is a great place and you love it. And we've got a lot of players who are really good fits here too.
Final 2 questions.
Of course, you've been up in Santa Fe a couple times this session and all that as well. Of course, with the the stadium renovation in the air and all that. What has this kind of experience been like for you? Because I know you were there last year.
Yeah,
you're a little bit more involved this year.
My message to you again: contact your local state senators, state representatives. Make sure you're expressing how important it is to invest in this university, invest in this football team. And again, I think this stadium can be a centerpiece for this whole state. Ironically, one of the days I was up there, the Artesia football team was being honored, and they won like 33 state championships. So great job. I just met Coach Maupin recruiting down there, and I mentioned to the state senator who's had that district, like, hey, you won 33, that might get a little stale. I mean, what would be better than to have those state championships in a brand new, recently redone stadium up here, like the basketball team goes to the pit to play those games. So I really hope that these next few weeks go well for us. I know Ryan Berryman has been doing a really good job up there, hustling around. Some of our other staff, Jalen was up there last week. We had an alumni session with a lot of those legislatures, and I think there's a lot of legislators. I think a lot of people are realizing that it's good for the whole state. You look at our bowl game, which I think averaged 4.4 million people watching our bowl game. I mean, that's really like a 3.5-hour advertisement for the University of New Mexico. It's a 3.5-hour advertisement for the state of New Mexico. No different than Jeff's bowl game is great exposure on ESPN for our state. So hopefully these next few weeks are good to us, and people will continue to invest. And I know there's people that invest in our program. We're going to give them a good return on that investment.
Roster's effectively set for spring ball and all that. In terms of there's no more spring portal and all that after the spring practice, whatever. If you guys wanted to add guys after to maybe fill a hole that you didn't realize and all that, is it you were going to look at the JUCOs and all that, or how would that process kind of look like in the way you guys are treating it?
Yeah, we went pretty aggressive. I mean, we're going to have to trim the roster some, from what our number is. We have a little wiggle room over the 105 because you have what they call DSAs, designated student athletes, that are exempt. from last year when the House settlement happened. So we're going to be able to be a little over 105, but we kind of went aggressive and adding guys and having good competition. So hopefully we don't get in that situation. But yeah, if you did have to look late, junior colleges will be a great option. I think there'll be some guys who just are in the portal and didn't sign anywhere. That if particularly if you have injuries and you may have to go, find someone because a spot's going to be out there. But we really tried to address our depth pretty competitively, where we have answers. We kind of, in a lot of spots, we don't have like one guy who, this is our only guy who can start at this position. We have a lot of ones where we're going to have competition through spring to see who gets it. And, we'll see. We may have to have some guys who we even, cut off the roster in the fall to get to our number. And, maybe we tell them, hey, we like it, we'll bring it back in the spring. We have a little bit more roster relief to try to earn that spot again. And maybe some guys who, NAI players, because the NAI doesn't really affect the portal. They're their own separate thing. So, if we have guys at the end of the spring who decide they want more playing time than they probably are going to get here, and that NAI may be an option for those guys because it doesn't get affected by the transfer portal windows.
All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you,
Coach.
Jason.